And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Let's look at your marine weather. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan here at the National Weather Service and looking at Alaska. On this Saturday afternoon, July 15th, we have low pressure over the southwest, just west of the Alaska Range and north of Bristol Bay. And this system is a surface system with some upper level energy also dropping in on the backside. It's going to keep this feature spinning here through Sunday into early Monday before it begins to slide southeastward across the lower southwestern Gulf into the North Pacific. So on Sunday, low pressure will be centered near Kodiak City on the north end of Kodiak Island in the western Gulf. And we'll continue to see areas of rain around this feature. In the vicinity of the low there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, we could see some small craft advisories with the winds in place there, and also some small craft advisories along western coastal areas. So by the time we get into Monday, that low will continue to gradually weaken and drift off toward the southeast, toward the lower Gulf and North Pacific. Another system will be making its entrance off the coast of Japan and Kamchatka and bring in a push of warmer air, at least across the central western Aleutians to start the week. So the ice across the Arctic region continues to slowly melt. Even though we are now in the summer season, this will be the case. And there's a fair amount of open water where the Mackenzie River dumps into the Canadian Arctic there east of Kaktovik. And also we have a lot of open water, the lower Chukchi Sea down through the Bering Strait. For areas of the southeast panhandle, the marine forecast on Sunday, south winds around 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. For Lynn Canal down through Stevens Passage and Dixon Entrance for the outer coast, look for southeast to south winds around 10 knots. Variable 5 to 10 knots outside of Yakutat Bay. Waves generally just a few feet there in areas of the nearshore waters of the Gulf Coast. And then for Monday, southerly winds will be around 15 knots throughout the inner channels with waves running 2 to 3 feet for the outer coast. South-southwest winds south of Sitka at 10 knots. They turn southeast to easterly 10 to 15 knots, Gustavus, and again outside of Yakutat Bay. For the northwestern Gulf on Sunday, we are anticipating, winds out of the southeast at about 20 knots. There's an area of low pressure situated here just outside the entrance of Cook Inlet. Now, at least through the Saturday evening and Saturday night, there are small craft advisories, but those will come down Sunday as winds only expected to be variable around 10 knots near this weak area of low pressure over lower Cook Inlet. Waves running a couple of feet there. Southeast winds 15 knots or so, Prince William Sound with 3-foot waves. On Monday, as that low center pushes southeastward, we expect winds to turn more northeasterly off the Kenai at 20 knots and then northerly winds around 15 knots down the length of Cook Inlet with waves 3-4 feet there. Still a little bit of a southeast to maybe going more easterly wind there out over Prince William Sound at 10 knots. I wouldn't be surprised by later in the day it becomes more northeasterly. And then for Sunday across Kodiak Island, southwest west winds 20 knots, waves right around 4 feet, including Shelikof Strait. The rest of the peninsula winds will be generally out of the west-northwest 15 to 20 knots, waves 3-4 feet on the North Pacific side, 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. And for Monday, north to northwest winds across Kodiak Island at 15 knots. Otherwise, west to northwest winds across the Alaska Peninsula at 15 to 20 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet on the North Pacific side within the nearshore waters, and around 4 feet on the Bering side. The eastern Aleutians on Sunday will see northwest winds 15 to 20 knots outside there of Dutch Harbor. Variable winds through the central Aleutians only at 10 knots, turning back toward the south-southwest at 15 knots west of Adak. And by Monday, winds will be west to northwest 15 to 20 knots in the vicinity of the eastern Aleutians, turning back toward the southwest and south, and increasing west of Adak. We could see winds upwards of 25 to 30 knots from the south ahead of that low that's way out back toward the coast of Japan, Kamchatka. And that will bring in a little stronger winds as we go through later Monday, and especially Monday night, Tuesday. Along the southwestern coast on Sunday, winds will be northwesterly around 20 knots, waves 3-4 feet within Kuskokwim, and Bristol Bays, as well as 4-foot waves off of the Yukon Delta. North winds to 15 knots with 3-foot waves there in the open waters of Norton Sound. And on Monday, winds will continue northwest 15 to 20 knots, Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, but turn a little more toward the west, even southwest at 10 to 15 knots from areas west of Nunavik Island, including St. Matthew, all the way up to off of the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound with waves running 2 to 3 feet in most areas. And then on Sunday, winds through the Bering Strait will be generally out of the north at 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet there. Lighter winds up along the northwest coast at 5 to 10 knots. And then winds will be out of the north-northeast 10 to 15 knots as you get around Prudhoe Bay eastward through Kaktovik. And for Monday, we expect winds along the Arctic coast to turn more northeast to easterly at 10 knots with waves where there is some open water at 2 feet. As we go down the northwest coast, winds will be out of the east-northeast 10 knots, trying to turn back in south of Point Hope. Southerly winds, though, through the Bering Strait running right around 10 knots with waves of 2 feet. And then on the west side of St. Lawrence Island, winds will be out of the west at 15 knots with waves there of 3 to 4 feet.